Hello, everyone. Peace be upon you. I hope you're doing well. So I'm going to be doing over uh, the section on istiwa, the establishment of God on the throne, the divine throne. I made the video and I published it, and maybe some of you already saw it, but I felt I didn't feel too confident about it, just due to slight misunderstandings here and there in the text. But I consulted, about some matters and got things cleared up. Praise God. So some of the concepts, may appear a certain way, and then we interpret it another way, and then it's like, wait a second, and then it's anyway. So we're gonna do it over. I want to mention that some things, if not many things in this creed have appeared to me as they've been natural. They like naturally. I would be. What I'm saying is that at first glance, I'm like, oh yeah, I get what this means. But then it's not until I start like overthinking, and this might be the case with a lot of other people out there. But that's when things go a different way. So anyways, so sorry for that in the previous video, meaning for my shortcomings and all. I'll try to make this video golden, and do the book justice. So before anything, I was listening to my previous video, the one that's before this discussion, and I remember bringing up my necklace. So this is Ayatul Kursi. We were talking about Al Kursi. It's a bit tarnished. You could find if you have one of these and you're wondering, oh, how do I get this stuff off? It's just tarnished. That's all. There's solutions that are sold to get rid of it. I have to do that. But anyway, I said that I said I'm not sure if Quran protects or doesn't protect. And then I said it does. I guess I was just in the discussion trying to get my points across, and so I kind of digressed. But in any case, Quran, I believe, does protect. There is protection in Quran by default. If Allah wills, a person can be protected by the Quran. I don't think that a person is not protected by the Quran. We have the Mu'awwidhatan, the two healing surahs of healing, Suratul Falaq and Suratul Nas. So those two surah, the last two chapters of the Quran, they're considered the healing verses. So yes, the Quran does protect. Now, I mean, I don't know if it protects someone who's, who does evil deeds, if it protects someone who's corrupt. I don't know about that. Not because the Quran has no power, that Allah gave it, that God gave it, but because of His own personal deeds which go against it, because of His position. But by default, I believe the Quran does carry a protection. Yes, it does. Among many other benefits. So that's one of the beautiful things about those about the words of God, the sincere and noble words of God. So before we begin, let's begin in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. I praise and I glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. So the meaning of establishing, istawa or istiwa. Istiwa is the you could say probably the noun or the infinitive to settle upon something or establish upon something. So the Quran mentions ala al-arsh istawa. Okay, so that's what we're going by. On the throne, he meaning God established Himself. That's what we're talking about here. Let's begin. The meaning of establishing, istiwa. Sayyid Abdullah ad-Daylami. This nobleman, Sayyid Abdullah, is a scholar who is he's a contemporary scholar who is alive in our time currently. May God protect and preserve him. So Sayyid Abdullah ad-Daylami, in his Sayf al-Maslul, the unsheathed sword, has nothing to do with hurting people. These are the names. When people name books, they name them different things. This author chose as Sayf al-Maslul. What the reason is for why they choose swords has nothing to do with violence. So anyone thinking, oh, Islam is violent and has to do with swords, and even their books are written titled involving swords, it's not. Don't take it literally. In any case, so in his As-Sayf al-Maslul, he argued that the verse, before anything, I seek refuge with God from the accursed Satan in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful. He argued that the verse, the most gracious, is established on the throne. The most gracious, meaning God, is established on the throne. Ar-Rahman ala al-Arshi istawa. Like Malik, remember the man came to Malik. In the last discussion, we spoke about a man who came to Malik ibn Anas and asked him about this verse. He said, how did God establish himself on the throne? So this is that verse. Ar-Rahman ala al-Arshi istawa. Quran, Surah 20, verse 5. Chapter 20, verse 5. So Sayyid Abdullah says that this is allegory, meaning it's not literal. It's metaphorical, it's allegory. It's an allegorical verse. He said, Sayyid Abdullah, firstly, it, i.e. the term istawa, is a consequential accident. Meaning what? Meaning that istiwa, this act, is a consequential accident. We said that accidents are those things which occur that they're occurrences. They're among those things which occur. They're not absolute. It's one of those things that God does not have. God does not is not characterized by accidents. This shirt that I'm wearing contains an accident. So the shirt is currently maroon, right? I hope so. If the camera is correct and if your eyes see right, it's maroon. Now, this is an accident. The texture, the color, the size, everything that makes it this shirt and that keeps it a shirt is an accident. Or what keeps it cloth, a piece of cloth or clothing, that's an accident. That's an accident. My beard is an accident. So, Sayyid Abdullah says that the establishing is a consequential accident. And I'll go over why he might have called it a consequential accident, an accident of consequence. So he says, and it denotes dominion. For it is the correct view for the one who reflects. So he says that the establishment on the throne denotes dominion. So now, before anything, he says it denotes dominion. I want to say from the get-go, from the beginning, so that we don't get confused along the way, because this section could come off as confusing. It could. When Sayyid Abdullah says that the dominion of God is an accident, he means that dominion is created dominion. That's what I am that's the understanding I have. The dominion of God is created. God created everything and then established dominion over it. Before he created everything, there was nothing to have dominion over. It's not to say that God has no power, but there was nothing to have dominion over. He created the creation and established dominion over it. So as a consequence, so what happened was he created everything. After that creation, after creating what he created, he established dominion over it. Both are accidents. God is not his dominion. Rather, the dominion is under the dominion of God, is a creation of God. Okay? So that's why most likely Sayyid Abdullah said it's a consequential accident. Like, why consequential? Because it came after another accident, such as the creation of the heavens and the earth and all that's in between. That's what I believe he's intending here. That's why. The dominion of God is created. The opponent says, he continues, Sayyid Abdullah continues, the opponent, meaning those who are most likely Salafis, the opponent says, when the word istawa is used with ala means on or upon. We'll explain, don't worry. When the word istawa, established upon, is used with ala, upon, its meaning is elevation and loftiness. Elevation means elevation, how high something is, like the elevation of a mountain, and then or elevation of an airplane, how high, and then loftiness also means is on the same subjects, or rather the same class of characteristics. Lofty means to be also elevated. Loftiness, elevated. I believe in the Quran, it mentions that the people of paradise, if I'm not mistaken, sit in lofty chairs, like very high, or lofty thrones, or not thrones, but rather chairs, if I'm not mistaken. They sit on lofty, it might say, I forget the word, but these are, it might be found in Surah Al-Waqi'ah. But lofty and elevation in any case mean how high. They denote level. Basically, how high is height, or not height, but something that's high. But in a more elevated and high, in that, for example, the cloud is elevated. The cloud is elevated. It's in a lofty place, in a high place. The heavens are lofty, because they're the heaven. So when it comes to this topic, I'm not going to go into detail, but let's just say that if one thing is on top of the other, that which is on top of the other is in a loftier position than the other, or it's in a lofty position. So assuming that we had, I want this to be understood. So if we had a building, the 5th floor is elevated and lofty. It's the loftiest floor. So that's what we mean. Physically, it's a physical description, okay? So the opponent says, quote, when the word istawa is used with ala, we'll explain, its meaning is elevation and loftiness. Like this book is being elevated and it's in a lofty position right now. Elevation and loftiness. This is from the consensus of the linguists. Consensus meaning the linguists have agreed generally, if not all, have agreed that this is the meaning. Loftiness and elevation. Okay? Consequently, and this is the author, Sayyid Abdullah, is continuing. Consequently, this invalidates any statement to the contrary, because elevation and loftiness indicates literal place by its wording. So as a result of this consensus, this has to mean that it's physical elevation and loftiness. Why? Because it indicates literal place by its wording. It is for this reason that Al-Jawhari is the author of As-Sihah, which is a book about, I believe, grammar, the Arabic grammar. It is for this reason that Al-Jawhari designates in As-Sihah, the book As-Sihah, that istawa indicates occupying, istila. Istila. It's either istila or istila. I think it's istila. Istila, which means occupying or conquering. Okay? So, something, occupying something. And ascension, to ascend over something, meaning to have some kind of, if I'm not mistaken, some kind of authority or power over it. not to ascend as in you're ascending, going upward, literally. The author of As-Sihah, meaning Al-Jawhari, who was amongst the Imams of the linguists, Al-Jawhari, testifies to this from the poet, who said, Bishr ascended on Iraq. Bishr istawa ala al-Iraq. Istawa ala. He did istiwa, established himself over, ala, over or upon Iraq, or on Iraq, without a sword and bloodshed, without a sword or bloodshed, Bishr ascended on Iraq. Bishr, I believe, was a Christian man. It doesn't matter what religion he was. It's about the wording. What does this mean? Bishr ascended on Iraq without a sword or bloodshed. Istawa ala al-Iraq. This poem proves that in the Arabic language, istawa may not indicate occupying something, because if istawa was literal, it would be impossible. How could a man be settled on Iraq in the literal sense? How can you be settled upon something the way I'm settled on this chair, right? I'm not slipping off. I'm settled upon it. I'm established upon this chair, upon this seat. How can a person do that on a country, on a land? How can you do what I'm doing upon a land? Did you expand yourself to fill that space physically, literally speaking? Did you expand yourself? Did you eat a lot? What happened? That's why the meaning is not that. Let's see. Verily, one may conquer Iraq without conflict. So let's read it. Bishr, let's say Bishr settled himself, like literally, on Iraq without a sword or bloodshed. It wouldn't make sense if we meant it literally. It'd be impossible, because the meaning of the istawa that a Salafi, the opponents, would means that they literally, you're settled upon something. What do you mean by that? What do you mean settle? That doesn't make sense. But if we use the definition that Al-Jawhari gave, which is to istila, which means istawla. Istawla means he conquered. They use the word ascended on. He conquered Iraq without bloodshed, or without a sword or bloodshed. Does that make sense? Makes sense. That's what it means. So the word istawla or istila means to establish. Sorry for my hair. I guess for a man, it's not the same as. Women you're supposed to wear hijab anyway. So, in any case, what happens is that how could a man be settled on Iraq? The definition that one may conquer Iraq is much more befitting. It fits with that poem. If someone argues and says, well, that person was a Christian, and let's say he says that the poet was before Islamic times, so what? Most mufassirin that I know, exegetes, people who interpret the Quran, use Arabic poetry by non-Muslims, and meaning the ones the Sunnis follow, meaning the ones the Salafis also follow. So that's one thing. The other thing is, how could you apply that meaning, the literal meaning, to this poem? It wouldn't make any sense. You can't apply it. Let's say a Muslim wrote the poem. No, well, it didn't happen. Well, then tell your mufassirin, those people who interpreted the Quran, tell them that what they did was wrong, and then you'll just continue with your life of confusion. May God guide those people. Let's continue. So verily, one may conquer Iraq without conflict. That's what it means, without a sword or bloodshed. Let's take a minute and just think that, let's say without a sword or bloodshed, let's say someone didn't know what that means, without a sword or bloodshed. Let's say a child or anyone just didn't know, what does it mean that someone went somewhere without a sword or bloodshed? Does it mean he wasn't like carrying a sword with him? Like just carrying it, not using it, just carrying a sword. He just has a sword sheathed, no pun intended, but he has, because the book is called The Unsheathed Sword. If someone had a sword sheathed or just carrying a sword and goes to Iraq and no bloodshed, no sword, no bloodshed, what does that mean? What do you mean without a sword or bloodshed? Bloodshed? Does it mean that he didn't kill people? Does it mean that he didn't kill animals, beings that have blood? Does it mean he didn't shed blood in some way? What does it mean? We know, at least many of us know, that it means there was no conflict. Obviously. Because when we say that it was a bloodless takeover, or if we say that there was without a sword or bloodshed, what do we mean? We mean that there was no war. It was a bloodless takeover. There was no conflict. But one may ask, but because we've been educated and perhaps exposed to these kinds of phrases so many times, we know what it means. But you see, this is another way of saying something, right? Without a sword or bloodshed, it's another way of saying there's no conflict. Just like the verse before it, Bishr istawa ala al-Iraq, Bishr did istiwa on Iraq. It doesn't mean that he literally established himself on Iraq. It means that he conquered Iraq without a sword or bloodshed. The puzzle piece fits. This is how the Arabs understood. What happened now is that when we study the Arabic language, perhaps we don't study the old Arabic language in order to better understand the Quran, which is why those exegetes who did study the old Arabic language, whether they're Mu'tazili or Zaydi or whichever school of thought they belong to, they studied the metaphors. You see, this is what happened. People do not know what the meaning could be. May God guide them. Even though it's mentioned in their books. The Salafis, don't they read books like Tafsir al-Tabari? Don't they read books like Tafsir al-Qurtubi? Do they not see that in there are there are meanings, other meanings? Al-Qurtubi did mention in his book, in his tafsir, he says that the mutakallimin, the people of kalam, so like Ash'aris and Maturidis and these, maybe he also meant Mu'tazila, maybe even Zaydiyah, but he says the mutakallimin said that God is not limited to any direction. When it came to this verse, if I'm not mistaken, it was this verse. They said God is not limited to direction. But he said, this man, I don't understand. I read his tafsir for the fiqh. I want to understand comparative fiqh. But if you continue reading what he said after what the mutakallimin say, what the mutakallimun are those people of kalam, of logic, logic Muslims like Ash'aris, Maturidis, Mu'tazila, Zaydiyah. But then he continues to say that the Salaf, the early Muslims, they believed that God, that direction is ascribed to God. That's what he said. I'm not making this up. Except the verse he was interpreting was chapter 6, verse 154. It was not chapter 20, verse 5. It was chapter 6, 154, I believe it was. Chapter 6, Surah Al-An'am. Actually, no, forgive me. Chapter 7, Surah Al-A'raf, if I'm not mistaken. Chapter 7, verse 154. Look it up, Tafsir al-Qurtubi. You can even probably find it in English, that part. He mentions what the Mutakallimun mentioned, then he mentions this. But still, At-Tabari, if I'm not mistaken, didn't do that. And if I'm not mistaken, Ibn Taymiyyah, the Shaykh of these Salafis, the ultimate Shaykh of these Salafis, Ibn Taymiyyah, he, if I'm not mistaken, praised Tafsir At-Tabari. And At-Tabari did not believe that God is in any one place. He specifies this in his book, if I'm not mistaken, in his Tafsir. He specifies that there is no literal location, if I'm not mistaken, At-Tabari. And those Salafis, they read those books. So how can a Salafi or anyone say that, oh, this person was a Christian and Bishr or the poet was a non-Muslim or what? Come on. So verily one may conquer Iraq without conflict. However, where is the consensus of the linguists? Is the settling of humans befitting to that of His Majesty? Of God? Is the settling that of humans, like what I'm doing right now, is it befitting to His Majesty? Question mark, exclamation mark. And also question mark, exclamation mark after where is the consensus of the linguists? Where is the consensus of the linguists? Didn't the opponents say that the consensus of the linguists says that it means elevation and loftiness? While there is another view by a linguist, Al-Jawhari. It's not just him, by the way. It's not just Al-Jawhari. You can find this in other books. I wouldn't be surprised if you go to a book like Lisanul Arab. Lisanul Arab, where you could find the definitions to many words. And one word, such as istiwa, could mean istila. But they tell you, see, the opponents say, oh, there's only one meaning, and that's elevation and loftiness. Literal elevation and loftiness. Shut up. We have to talk like this. You know? It's like, how can you say that there's consensus and then provide only one text, meaning that text that says by the opponents, that says when the word istawa is used with ala, its meaning is elevation and loftiness. This is from the consensus of the linguists. How can you say that there's consensus and then provide only one text that you claim objects to the view of istawa denoting the establishment of rule? And then that you claim objects to the view denoting, meaning that the view that istawa means establishment of rule. How could you do that? His objection does not clearly demonstrate that which he is attempting to establish. Rather, it proves the opposite, that there is no consensus about that. He's saying there's consensus? No, you're proving the opposite. There is no consensus. His meaning the opponent. Even if he did say that it was literal, we would say a point of physical contact, malamis, point of physical contact, malamis, occurs when one part of something is in contact with a part of something else, right? Physical contact, one part of something makes contact with something else. Physical contact. Then according to you, so a point of physical contact occurs when one part of something is in contact with a part of something else. Then according to you, God's istiwa is like that of a man on the back of a donkey? Is like that of a man on a donkey? That withstanding, the istiwa on the back of a donkey is a point of physical contact, a place and a position. Would you say something like that about God? If you say yes, meaning you would say something like that about God, you blaspheme, kafarta, you've committed kufr, disbelief. The word kafarta is used in parentheses. Blaspheme, kafarta. If you say no, I wouldn't say something like that about God, how can you authenticate the testimony of these two verses, the verses of the poem that talk about conquering Iraq? How could you authenticate those verses with your definition, meaning that istiwa means elevation and loftiness? You see, how can it denote that meaning? How could you apply that meaning to what is to the poem, to those two verses? And the exalted statement And how can you authenticate the verse of the Quran, where the exalted, meaning God, the ark says, the ark rested, istawa, on Mount Judi. The ark rested on Judi. Because it says istawa. The ark istawa on Mount Judi. How would you define that verse? Your definition of istiwa is, if you say istawa ala, is that it's loftiness and elevation. And that's according to the consensus of scholars. That's what he said. He said it's according to the consensus of scholars. The consensus of linguists, forgive me. The consensus of scholars of language, of linguists. So how can your definition of istiwa apply to this verse, which is that the ark of Noah, peace be upon him, settled on the Judi, rested on Mount Judi, istawa on Mount Judi, istawa. Quran 11:44, chapter 11, verse 44. It does not mean elevation and loftiness, but mounting by physical contact indicates place and position on a mountain known as Judi in Iraq. But it does not mean elevation or loftiness, but mounting by physical contact indicates place and position on a mountain known as Judi in Iraq. So I see here three meanings of istiwa. One, elevation and loftiness, which I don't know if that's one of the definitions. Even if it means that, that's fine. If that's one of the meanings. But there are two other definitions that I see here. If we count that as one, istawa ala, if we say it's loftiness and elevation, okay. Let's count that as one. Two, it means istila, meaning ascending over something or on something, meaning conquering something. To conquer something, to conquer. Istawla ala, like it means to conquer something. Or to ascend on something, meaning to occupy it, meaning to occupy and like to conquer it. Conquest. That's two, meaning number two. To establish rule over it. Number three is to settle in a place like a mountain, like on a position and a place. I'm settled on this chair in a way like the Ark of Noah. Like the Ark of Noah settled in a place, in a position, and a place in a mountain. Or like a person establishes himself upon a donkey. You see? But that's not what it means. So those are those are three definitions that I see. One is loftiness and elevation, which I'm not sure is a definition, but let's just count it as so. I'm not sure if it is. Two, that it means to establish rule and authority over some place, to conquer some place, meaning to establish authority over a place. Three, to make physical contact with something and establish yourself upon it, like on a donkey, on the back of a donkey, or on a chair. Settling. They're not invalid definitions in themselves, but when we apply them to the Quran or verses of the Quran or verses of poetry, does it work? Does this puzzle fit in this poem? No. Puzzle piece, forgive me. This is what's being intended. What's intended. This is the intention of this piece of writing. That what you're saying is refuted, and he refutes it. The opponents of that view, of the view of authority and rule, If I'm not mistaken, it's the authority, the opponents of that view, of the authority and rule. I believe that view. Yeah, because, okay, the opponents of that view argue using the statement of Abil Hasan al-Ash'ari. Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari is the said, claimed, well, no, he's not the claimed. He's the founder of the Ash'ari school, but it's said that the Ash'ari way was the way of the early Muslims, which is not true. That's not true. But in any case, let them say what they want to say. So the opponents of that view argue using the statement of Abil Hasan al-Ash'ari, who asks, how can God's establishment on the throne mean establishing rule and power? How can it mean that? I don't believe he believed it was in the literal sense. He's just questioning how can it mean that, because Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari I don't think believed in God literally being a physical body, literally. I believe Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari himself was he differed from his students. He believed in tafweed, I think. He accepted that there's something called a hand. He accepted there's something called a face, things like that. He accepted that in the Quran, but he did not ask how. I think that was his view. Somehow, I don't know, his view went to say something else. They started talking like Mu'tazila, like those of us who are Mu'tazila or Zaydiyya talk. They started saying that God exists without, these meanings are all metaphorical. But if I'm not mistaken, Abu Hasan al-Ash'ari himself, he acknowledged that there is something called a hand. He had the view of the mufawwidah, tafweed. He did not interpret at least when it came to certain verses. So anyways, he asks, of course, Abu Hasan is way before Sayyid Abdullah's time, but Abu Hasan asks, how can God's establishment on the throne mean establishing rule and power? So he opposed that view. He opposed the view of rule and power. That's what I'm understanding here. He's opposing the view that it means rule and power, dominion. How can God's establishment on the throne mean establishing rule and power, while everything is already under his power and authority? Everything's already under his power of authority, so how can his establishment on the throne mean establishing rule and power when everything is already under his power and authority? Sayyid Abdullah responded to this question which was asked in the past. He said, istawa means to have authority over. That's the meaning. The throne means dominion. Consequently, the heavens, earth, and everything in them and between them are under his dominion. He created the heavens and the earth, and he established his dominance, his dominion over them. He established a kingdom, rulership over them. By the way, Malik means king in Arabic, Malik. Malik means owner. So these two words, I don't doubt that they have the same root word. So ownership, kingdom, they both have to do with each other. And if you think about it, I'm just using my noggin. I'm using my brain here. Malik, the king, does he own everything? Yes or no? Yes, he does. He owns everything is his subject. A king on the earth. He owns everything. He owns the land. He owns everything. That's how. So God refers to himself as king because a king, according to us humans, means one who is in control of everything. Except God is just. And God is not the king, that literally sits on a throne. No, it's a way for God to communicate with the creation. That's why he speaks to us in a language. Why does he use human language? Does God speak Arabic with the angels? Does God speak Hebrew with the angels during the time of Moses? Did God speak Syriac or Aramaic with the angels during the time of Jesus? The answer is no. There is no language. But he uses a language in order for the people to understand. Do you see where we fall, where our position is? We don't take things literally. That's why books like this, beautiful books like this, are written. So istawa means to have authority over. The throne means dominion. Consequently, the heavens and everything in them and between them are under his dominion. Consequently, as a consequence, they're under his dominion. And that dominion is created. It's also created. It's not co-eternal with God. Despite that, God is still absolute. He created everything and then established his dominion over everything. Everything. Then the establishment of God on his throne refers to him establishing his dominion by means of commands and prohibitions. His occupancy indicates his commands and prohibitions throughout the universe. The throne that exists is not a literal throne, as was stated by Ibn Taymiyyah. It is similar to a narration that states that the throne always existed along with God from eternity. This would lead to the view that the throne existed pre-eternally. It is well known that there is nothing that exists pre-eternally except God. Right or wrong? Everything. We're gonna continue with other subjects, and we're going to further defend our position. And I'm going to make sure that I defend these positions as hard as I can, because the opponents, when you go to YouTube or anything involving social media or the internet, you find some apes that pop up saying stupid things. I'm not talking about fiqh, jurisprudence. I'm talking about creed, beliefs. And I will call them apes. It's high time we start to become harsher with those who tamper with the religion from the Muslim world. I'm not talking about those who are non-Muslims. Those who are non-Muslims, they don't know, and may God guide them. There, in my opinion, in many cases, they might be more innocent because they don't know any better. Many of them. It's the ones who are within that are the problem. So we prove them wrong with the verbal sword, with the written sword, the pen, the paper, the tongue. And if someone cannot speak, sign language, whatever way you communicate, everyone can do it. No one is incapable, God willing. And may God make us strong. Amen. So, it is well known that there is nothing that exists pre-eternally except God. It would mean that the powerful and majestic, meaning God, the powerful and majestic was established over a great thing amongst his creation, which is the throne. This would prove that it was necessary for him to establish himself over something other than himself, other than himself, to establish himself over something other than himself. He's establishing himself over something that he created. That's what it means. Sayyid Abdullah, from what I see in the translation, he's very deep. He's very deep. He's an intelligent man, but he's very deep, as you can see. He's very deep. That this is because I don't blame myself. I blame myself for having been a bit confused here and there. It's just the way he writes. He kind of like goes from one topic, but he's making points. Once understood, you're like, oh, I see what he means. Of course. He wrote a treatise. I just found out about it yesterday. Well, rather, I just opened it yesterday, but I didn't finish reading it. It's not that long. I just didn't have the time to finish reading it. But this is from the treatise As-Sayf al-Maslul. this would prove that it was necessary for him, Most High God, to establish himself over something other than himself. This is based on the statement of the one who said that the throne is literal. Otherwise, one would say that God established himself on the throne in the literal sense rather than establishing rule. So you're going to say that God established himself on something literal. He's relying on it. He's depending on it. He's upon it. He's sitting on it. He's relying on something he created. Did he not create the throne? The Ash'aris say he created everything, which means that the throne is a created thing. Has to mean that. I'm not sure if that's what they believe, because they believe the Quran was uncreated, not the book, but the words. So if the we'll talk about that. So if the Quran, if the throne is a created thing, can God be sitting on something he created like the Salafis say? Absolutely not. Why is it impossible? God can make anything possible. It's divine. It's a divine way of doing things. You really believe that God is limited to a place called a throne at some point, and sometimes he leaves it and comes, descends on Thursday nights? There is a belief that, they believe, take it literally, that he descends every Thursday night or every night, and towards the end of the night, meaning towards dawn, he descends and he listens to his servants' supplications, meaning when people ask God for the prayers that people ask God for the supplications, when someone asks God for something, for blessings, for health, for wealth. So is that what you're saying, that God moves from one place to another, just like me? You've compared him to creation when he said there is nothing like laysa kamithlihi shay, laysa kamithlihi shay. There is nothing like him. If it is affirmed that it is the creation of God, it is also affirmed. Sorry, I skipped where I was reading. So otherwise, one would say that God established himself on the throne in the literal sense rather than establishing rule. If your belief is it's literal, and you say that if it's literal and he established himself upon it, I can't imagine what it would mean to say that he conquered the throne, the literal throne. What would you mean by that? Conquered the literal throne. It's not a literal throne in any way. So the answer to the question, if someone's wondering, so is the throne literal or not? The answer is no, it's not literal. The word throne indicates dominion. Regardless of whether it is metaphor or literal, we continue. Regardless of whether it is metaphor or literal, now I believe the commentators are speaking. Regardless of whether it is metaphor or literal, Imam al-Hadi, peace be upon him, demonstrates God's pre-existence by stating that he existed before the divine throne. Before the divine throne. Therefore, it is a creation of God. If it is affirmed that it is the creation of God, it is also affirmed that he is completely independent of it. Munazzih. That's what tanzih means. That God is completely independent of everything else. He's not reliant on a throne or on the heavens or in this. He is not in the sky. He doesn't have any features that we have or characteristics that we have. That's what we are. That's the path we are on. Mu'tazilah and Zaydiyah. And others too. But this is to promote us. Yes? It's to promote us. You don't have to follow the jurisprudence they follow. This is the belief. Jurisprudence, choose what jurisprudence you want. This is belief, meaning Islamic laws. This is belief. To imagine that the omnipotent deity, God, that the omnipotent deity sits upon it in a literal sense is limiting him and making him dependent upon that which he created. Such a fanciful view cannot be entertained by a mind enlightened by God-given logic and divinely revealed text. That's where we end. It cannot be, imagine, what was the word he used? It cannot be entertained by a mind enlightened by God-given logic and divinely revealed text. By God-given logic and divinely revealed text. Quran. It's to the right of me. Divinely revealed text. Quran. Or the Gospels, the true Gospel, or the Torah, or the Psalms of David, or any divine text that God revealed. Those words were the commentators' words. When they mentioned Imam al-Hadi, peace be upon him, it was not words from the book that this book is based on. It was not from the usul. Just to make it clear, the book of the fundamentals, which this book is a commentary of. Okay, so I hope you guys understood that. I hope that was clear. The throne is not literal. It indicates the dominion of God with evidence. I'm just looking through just to see if there's anything else I want to cover quickly, if there is anything. Yeah. So there's nothing I see. I feel that I feel satisfied. I feel content with this. I have to do you guys justice, and I have to do the text justice. So I have to explain it as best as I can with good understanding. So in any case, this is how it is. The throne is not a literal throne. It indicates God's dominion over all things, over all his creation, all the creation, all around me, all around you, everything. This is how it is. Praise God. Allahu Akbar. God is the greatest. Do you see how these beliefs, they exalt, they reflect the exaltedness of God? Do you see this? Do you see how the beliefs that we've been speaking of in the last 16 lessons or so? Do you see how they do justice to God? Would you choose another kind of God after knowing about the one that we have described? If you do, may God guide you. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say. I was asked the other day, what does the Quran say about respecting other religions? If I'm not mistaken, that was a question. Well, the Quran did not specifically say anything about respecting other religions, but it gave us all the implications as to how we are supposed to behave towards, or how we're supposed to view other religions. All other religions are false, except Islam. Islam meaning submission to God. All of the other ones are invalid. Similarly, they view us as invalid. So nobody can say, oh, well, these Muslims, they consider us invalid. Well, Christians consider us invalid. In any case, we reserve the right. In any case, we reserve the right to say what's invalid and what's valid. That's according to our belief. So, and according to our book. So their beliefs are what we shun. Though their beliefs, just like we shun the Trinity. The people we respect. We respect the people. We're kind to the people. We respect them. If they respect us, we respect them. If they disrespect us, like the Zionists, we don't respect the Zionist religion or the Zionist at all. So with those people, we don't even say hi to them. If you sincerely, genuinely want to give them da'wah, if you know any of them and you want to invite them, I don't object to that. Why? Because the Prophet went through the worst of people and he brought many of them to Islam. Well, we're not the Prophet. Take him as an example. That's the Sunnah. But generally speaking, those who are open murderers and killers and believe in doing such things. Similarly, with someone who's a Nazi, you're not supposed to look at, again, with the Nazi, same thing. You're not supposed to deal with him. If you want to sincerely invite him to what is right, that's another story. There's a man a black man, brought a man out of the KKK, which is not deemed as a terrorist group, I don't think, in this country, in the United States. He brought him out of the KKK. He would attend their rallies, a black man. He would attend their rallies and just watch. He just wanted to observe. A musician. You can look it up. He's a musician, and he would keep going until the chief wizard. They have wizards, the chief wizard, Wizard of Oz, a liar, basically. They're liars. Anyway, so the chief wizard, who was a cop at the same time, he was a cop. He abandoned his position as the leader of the KKK. He abandoned it. He left because of what that black man, of his behavior. The black man mentions that he was when he was a Boy Scout, and I think he was in a parade somewhere on the East Coast. I don't know if it was Massachusetts or where, but he was the only black person, I think. And people would throw cans on him, and they were throwing stuff on him, I think. This is the same person. SubhanAllah, glory be to God. This man brought the leader of a white supremacist movement out. He was also a cop, so I don't know if he retired because of him as well, but the man, when he speaks, the black man, I forget his name, when he speaks about that experience, he shows the uniforms, both, if I'm not mistaken, the police uniform as well as the wizard uniform that the man gave them to him, and he uses them in his as for exhibition purposes. These are they. So those people who are misguided, we ask God to guide them. That's all we can do. We can debate them, we can dispute them, but may God guide them, So yes, we denounce other people's religions, but we don't denounce them as people. We reject their religions with evidence and with proof in a kind manner. Don't be harsh, and but we don't denounce them. They're humans. They're people. It could be us that was in their positions at some point. It could be us that's in their position currently. So, but people are subject to change, God willing. In any case, thank you for watching. I hope we learned something today. Take care always. Keep safe. And I'll see you on the next discussion, God willing. Peace be with you.